Have you ever really thought about the secret life of a React component? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to follow its entire journey, right from the moment it's born on your screen, through its active life, and all the way to the moment it disappears.
No, seriously, think about it for a second. They just pop into existence, they react when you click on them, they update with new information. It's almost like they have a life of their own, right? Well, guess what? They kind of do. And understanding that life is absolutely key to mastering React.
So, the secret sauce behind all this is something called the component lifecycle. You can think of it like a script, a totally predictable sequence of events and methods that React calls at very specific moments. Every single component follows this script from creation to removal.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start at the very beginning with its birth, what we call mounting. Then we'll see how it lives and changes during the updating phase. We'll cover its final moments in unmounting, and then we'll see how modern React handles all of this with hooks. And finally, we'll wrap up with why this whole journey is so critical for you to understand.
Okay, let's kick things off right at the beginning. Phase 1, mounting. This is the component's birth. This is literally the moment React takes the code you've written, builds the component, and slaps it right into the DOM so you can actually see it on the page.
And this whole birth process, it's not just random chaos. Nope. It happens in a super precise 3-step sequence: constructor, then render, and finally, component did mount. Let's break down what each one does. First up, we have the constructor. This is the very first thing that gets called, even before your component shows up anywhere. This is where you do all the initial setup, like initializing its state, its starting point, and binding your event handlers. It's basically like setting up the component's DNA before it's even born.
All right. Next up, the main event, the render method. This is the part that actually does the drawing. It takes all that state and props and spits out the JSX that tells the browser, hey, this is what you need to show on the screen. It's the component's big debut.
And then, right after that render happens and the component is officially on the screen, component did mount gets called. The component is now live and part of the DOM, which is a huge deal because now it can actually interact with the browser and, the rest of the world.
And this is where things get really practical. I mean, think about it. Why would you go fetch a bunch of data from a server for a component that hasn't even appeared on the screen yet? It just doesn't make sense. That's why the #1 classic use case for component did mount is kicking off that initial API call to get the data it needs to display. All right, so the component is born. Now what? Well, now it starts living its life. Welcome to phase 2, updating. This is what goes down anytime its state changes. Maybe a user clicks a button, or it gets new props from its parent. This is where the magic of interactivity really happens. And just like mounting, this update cycle follows a very specific order. It kicks off with a really important question in should component update. Then, our old friend render comes back for an encore, and it all wraps up with component did update.
So before React just blindly re-renders everything, it pauses and asks a question with should component update. Hey, do I really need to do this update? And this little method is a huge deal for performance. It's your chance to step in and tell React, you know what? Nothing important changed. Just skip this render.
Now, if the answer to that question is yes, we absolutely need to update, then render gets called again. It just runs with all the new information, the new state or props, and creates an updated version of the UI, all ready to go. You see the pattern here, right? Just like component did mount runs after the first render, component did update runs right after an updated UI hits the screen. This makes it the perfect spot to do things that depend on the new DOM being there, like maybe scrolling to a new item that just got added to a list. Well, all good things must come to an end, and that's true for our components too. This brings us to phase 3, unmounting. This is the final chapter, the moment when a component is removed from the screen and destroyed for good.
And for this phase, there's really only one method you need to know. Component will unmount. Think of it as the component's last words, its final chance to clean up after itself before it disappears forever.
And trust me, this cleanup is not optional. It is vital. Imagine you set up a timer that ticks every second inside a component. If that component gets removed, but you never told the timer to stop, well, it just keeps on ticking in the background forever. That's a memory leak. Component will unmount is your one and only chance to say, hey, timer, stop, and prevent those kinds of problems.
Okay, so everything we've covered up to this point, the constructor, component did mount, all that jazz, that's the world of class components. But as you probably know, modern React has a new, much cleaner way to handle all this stuff, hooks, and specifically the useEffect hook.
And this is where you really see the magic of hooks. They take all those different lifecycle methods and basically combine them into one superhook, useEffect. So if you want to do something just once when the component mounts, use useEffect with an empty dependency array. That's your component did mount. Need to run some code only when a specific piece of data changes? That's your component did update. You just put that data in the dependency array. And what about cleanup? Easy. You just return a function from your effect. React will run that function right before the component unmounts. It's your component will unmount. See? It's elegant. One hook to rule them all.
Okay, so we've been on this whole journey with our component, from birth to death. But let's get down to it. Why does any of this matter to you when you're actually building an app? Let's talk takeaways.
Well, understanding this lifecycle basically gives you developer superpowers. It gives you control. You get to decide exactly when things happen. You get better performance because you can stop React from doing unnecessary work, and you get more reliable apps because you know exactly where to clean up your messes to prevent bugs like memory leaks. And in today's React, useEffect is the key that unlocks all of it.
So there you have it, the entire blueprint of a component's life. The question I'll leave you with is this. Now that you know this predictable story, this journey that every single component takes, how are you going to use it? How will you use this knowledge to build apps that are not just functional, but truly powerful and efficient?
Hey, thanks for sticking with me through this whole journey. If you learned something today, make sure to follow for more tips and deep dives into React.